We got Webster 5 minutes to the next hour, and then I'll get to your calls and into the whole situation with the toll roads all over the country. One of the biggest scams out there. We're exposing the whole carbon tax fraud. Next is the globalist power grab where they buy your politicians off and then they hand your existing roads over to the toll road companies who've been caught engaging in all sorts of chicanery. But Webster, looking at the economy, we suddenly have Geithner 2 weeks ago on Meet the Press saying it's going to be the worst time of our lives. It's going to be the hardest time. It's going to last a long time. So they've gone from saying we're in the middle of a boom, which everybody knew was asinine, to going, my gosh, it's going to be horrible. You better give us trillions more in bailout. You better cut your services, raise taxes, and pay it all to offshore banks. That will fix it when it's a black hole that we know is impossible to pay, induced via fraud. So where is this going? I mean, it looks like the Obama hoax, their front man to sell austerity, is absolutely evaporating.
Well, I think we have to start, first of all, with the fact that Italy has now joined Greece and Spain, Portugal, Ireland in this euro crisis. Now, once you have the 2000... But
that was planned. I mean, they're just taking... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, planned. It's a world economic depression, right? We have London going down in 2007, 2008. We have, above all, New York going down. Every bank in Wall Street bankrupt in September of 2008. And now you've got the same thing coming home in the European government bonds, but also the European banks. If you take a look at Commerzbank, the second largest bank in Germany, they seem to be in some kind of a downward spiral that looks very much like Lehman Brothers. And people are looking at Bank of America here in the United States in somewhat the same framework. It is a world economic depression. Now, that means that in order to get out of that, you've got to have a recovery program. What will not help you, and I repeat, not, is a chaotic, deflationary panic crash of the whole thing, which is what the Austrian school, I guess, always prefers, right? That you've got to have the highest possible unemployment, liquidate stocks, liquidate bonds, liquidate the farmer, liquidate labor, liquidate everybody. That simply won't work. Now, concerning this debt limit, the problem that you face is that the productive economy of the world is stuck together with the zombie banks, the hedge funds, and their derivatives. If you want to separate them, that is exactly what should be done. That's what I've been fighting for quite a while. If you want to know how to do that, at the top of my website, tarpley.net, there's a 5-point program that explains a whole series of measures how to do that. You've got to basically... Bring
Glass-Steagall back, triage the debt, arrest the banksters who the Senate committee admit have engaged in fraud.
Yeah. Ban some derivatives, ban credit...
And give out 0% credit to small businesses.
Yeah, precisely, and all these things. At that point, you can cut loose the speculators, the zombie banks, and let them go down. But the way to do that is not to have the bankruptcy of the United States. We basically have two choices.
No. They're at the end of their road, they mean to bankrupt us, they admit. Instead of them being bankrupted, they created the fraud to bankrupt us, but they're the authors of it, they own it, and we're not going to cut them loose. We're going to put them in handcuffs.
All right, fine, which is fine. And that, in many cases, criminal prosecutions are still long overdue from 2007, 2008. But generally the proposition is, either the United States will put Wall Street, the hedge funds, and the rating agencies into bankruptcy receivership and a lot of them in jail, or the Wall Street characters, the zombie banks, the hedge funds, and the rating agencies will decree the bankruptcy and the destruction of the United States. Now, in that case, you get neo-feudalism. You get something worse than what you had in Europe during the Dark Ages, because at least they had a church to provide...
Well, that's what I want to talk about, because, I mean, this is not something to scare you folks. I'm scared. I mean, the road we're going down is absolute, total post-industrial, complete collapse, and it's not like the Depression when most people were self-sufficient. Back in 1 minute. By the way, this came out a few weeks ago and fell under the radar. But the Malawi Voice is reporting, and we've done some ferreting and confirmed it, 131 children vaccinated at gunpoint in Africa. And the UN's been caught doing this through their subsidiaries before. That's coming up. Webster Tarpley, finishing up with you, and I appreciate you joining us, your courage to go to Libya. And hopefully we'll have a end of this bloody war for all sides. But continuing from your economic analysis as an economist and a historian, uniquely suited, in the 4 minutes we've got left, if the current course of global austerity and banker hegemon continues on its current trajectory, what is going to happen to this country and the world?
Well, the immediate threat now is this question of the debt limit, and I'm in favor of raising the debt limit with no conditions attached, because if you don't do that, what is it? We're told that we don't need the government, we only have the market, and the market is more than enough. I'm afraid this is false. This is historically not true. You would get chaos. You would indeed get a catastrophe. I think the catastrophe is much worse than what Geithner has talked about. Specifically, the dollar is a reserve currency. What does that mean? It means that central banks all over the world have their reserves in dollars, right? That's less than it used to be, some euros, some gold, some other things, but the vast majority still dollars. Now, if the United States doesn't pay on the Treasury bonds will have a sharp collapse in price. That means interest rates go up. The dollar will have a sharp collapse, maybe a panic. Maybe you'll have finally everybody rushing for the exits. And at that point, the central bank reserves of the world will be devalued. At that point, you will have a world panic. And a world panic is measured in megadeaths. It's measured in millions of people who won't make it. Maybe not here, some here, I'm sure, but maybe more in Somalia or some other poorer parts of the world. Therefore, if you want to have a new reserve currency, that's a great idea. But then again, you need something that looks very much like the U.S. Treasury market, with $1 trillion a day of turnover and the ability to take just about any amount of paper and turn it into money, trillions if necessary, of dollars, any day. That's liquidity.
So you're going with the model of flooding the people with money because they're already devaluing, they're just flooding the banksters with money.
I would avoid the default. I think the default would be catastrophic, and people who say otherwise are wrong. Now, in terms of what to do, fight back.
But Webster, the default's already technically happened. The Chinese government said that.
The Chinese are crybabies.
Oh, really? Ron Paul, look, debating debt ceilings, they've already created a debt system impossible to pay.
Yeah, it has to be reformed, but the way to do it is not a deflationary panic crash that gets you worse than the Great Depression within a couple of months. The Chinese should butt out of the internal affairs of the United States. I'm not interested in the Chinese whining that they bought these bonds. That was a very foolish investment for them to begin with, so they get more or less what they bargained for. I'm not a lawyer for the Chinese, and the Republican Party seems to want to pay the Chinese before they pay the American people. I'm not for that. So I think that we don't have a default. We have not had a default, and the idea to blur the line, I think, is also misleading. Rather, what can we do? These rating agencies are attacking the United States. Now, I've often said those guys should be trembling in the dock, waiting for the sentences, dressed in orange jumpsuits based on what they did in 07 and 08. And in Italy, the man of the hour is a guy called Michele Ruggiero, Ruggero. Michele Ruggiero is the Italian state prosecutor of Trani, Trani. This is down in the heel of the boot.
And he's looking into the debt rating agency fraud.
He raided them. He went with the finance guards, the Italian Guardia di Finanza. He raided the ratings agencies and demanded to know, what are your connections? Is this a conspiracy? What are you doing? That's the way to go.
All right, Webster, we'll continue to track this as it unfolds. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Tarpley.net. Follow us at Twitter. Real Alex Jones at Twitter.